2021 is going to be a historic year for CPET. Come on this exhilarating journey with us. See you at CPET 2021. '21 is going to be a historic year for CPET. Come on this exhilarating journey with us. See you at CPET 2021.
Well, hello and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joy Alampay, Executive Director of Asia Society Philippines. Welcome to Eyes on Singapore, the second iteration of the Asia Society Philippines Eyes on Asia series. So, Eyes on Asia aims to promote and understand a country of focus through each of its iterations, whether through arts, through culture, or policy. So today, we hope to do just that. We hope you can join us and as we immerse in true Singaporean fashion through the arts with hashtag Heart for Art Conversation, together with partners who have made this conversation possible, the Singapore International Festival of Arts and Ticket to Me, Philippines. To further introduce us to the program, please help me welcome a friend and a previous colleague, Mr. Boon Hui Tan. Boon Hui is the Executive Director of Arts House Limited, where he leads the strategic development and operations of the organization across its 6 arts housing and arts presentation spaces, including the Arts House, Victoria Theatre and Concert Hall, a drama center, and Goodman Arts Center, all in Singapore. And close to our hearts is that from 2015 to 2020, Boon Hee was our Vice President for Global Artistic Programs at the Asia Society and Director of the Asia Society Museum in New York. So Boon Hee's list of leading projects of passion only continues to grow. And we can't wait to see more of what you'll be creating with your team. So Boon Hee, welcome.
Hi. Hello, Joy. Thanks, Joy, for that wonderful introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Boon Hui Tan. I'm the Executive Director of the Arts House Limited, which is the organizer of the Singapore International Festival of Arts. I think the arts is facing a very peculiar situation since, of course, the COVID pandemic hit. In the first phase, I suppose, there was a lot of talk that the web and the digital medium would be, in a sense, the alternative, So that first phase, we saw a lot of rush towards, when live performances close, cinemas close, museums close, a lot of rush towards what we call live streaming, which essentially is sort of almost like a documentary recording of what is essentially and at heart a live performance. And that occupied us, I suppose, for much of the first year of the COVID pandemic. And in Singapore, of course, last year, Singapore International Arts Festival had to be cancelled because of the pandemic, and digital alternatives were found. I think what we're moving into now, as it becomes clear that the pandemic will never really go away in the sense of like smallpox or other historical diseases, but is more likely to become possibly like the flu. That means something that is endemic, something that we always have to prepare for. So then what happens to the arts? So this year's festival has a kind of partial solution, at least, in the sense that the artistic director, whom you'll hear from later, has programmed a VOD season of the main commissions. That means instead of live streaming, instead of it being documentary, we literally use the filmic medium. We treat the recording as a film to be screened not live, to be streamed not live, but post the live performance. So it becomes, I suppose, an artwork on its own, a film that is edited, a film that is sound balanced, that people can enjoy. I think partly in conversations among the arts community, some people have pointed out that at least this is an attempt to not just succumb to so-called Zoom fatigue, that we're forever just consuming this. And in performance, as well as performance art from visual artists, this element of the live, of the actual encounter with the moving body of the artist, I think it's what defines it, and something that a television screen, a computer monitor will never be able to accommodate. So I think moving forth from this, there are two possible things that are emerging. One is, of course, that the artists are embracing this reality by creating performance that is intimate, that may be one-to-one, they may be two-to-one, that occurs in real time over the internet, over the through the computer screen, and we will have one or two performances like that, projects like that. in the SIFA. The other is, of course, that I think as situations evolve, artists as well as arts companies and arts festivals, visual art biennials will begin to plan always with the fact that your plan B may actually come into effect. We don't know when the next sort of burst, if at all, will come. Hopefully it doesn't come. But the reality is we will have to plan not for one festival, but for one festival plan A, one festival plan B, one festival plan C. That is going to be the reality. And it's wonderful that I think, we are beginning to see both artists and arts organizations living up to that great promise. So I think all that I've said is, in a sense, it's also very abstract, very conceptual. I think the remaining part of the meat of this session, the conversation with the festival director, I think will give you more like actual concrete food for thought and things to chew upon. And as an arts community, I would like to think and I hope that we will get through this together. We will come out, maybe not in a sense through the other side, but we will all be riding the same wave on the same boat, and we will support each other. So without further ado, I want to hand over the program to your hosts, as well as Gaurav Kripalani, the festival director of this year's SIFA. So just a little bit about, I've only just met him, but Darwin Mariano, I was very happy to learn, is also very familiar with Singapore. He has, worked in Singapore for very long. And when I read his resume, he is a true polymath, being both an entrepreneur, a professional manager, a theater producer, a lawyer as well, in his many years of work. So both, in commerce as well as in the thick of the arts. And today, I think, upon his return to the Philippines as the founder and CEO of Ticket to Me, which is the Philippines' first fully digital and fastest growing ticketing and event technology company with more than 11,000 cash payment outlets throughout the country, is really, really, in a sense, a critical intermediary in the arts sector. So, it could only come from someone who both knows the arts intimately as well as the world of business and commerce. And I'm very proud to also say that, Darwin is also an Asia Society Asia 21 fellow. My previous life was, of course, with Asia Society, and it's wonderful to have this opportunity to work with him. So without further ado, I want to hand the program over to your host, Darwin Mariano.
Thank you very much, Bunhui. Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Asia Society. Thank you, SIFA. And thank you, everyone who is joining us this afternoon from the very hot and scorching Southeast Asian region. I don't know currently the weather in Singapore, but in the Philippines, it is scorching, and it really does make for a very, very interesting atmosphere for our conversation this afternoon. Thank you again for the very kind introduction. Before I bring in our host, let me give you a quick background on who our guest for this afternoon is. So throughout his 25-year career with the Singapore Repertory Theatre, he has produced over 200 productions. As an actor, he has performed in musicals Sing to the Dawn, Shakespeare in the Park's Hamlet, and most recently in the Pulitzer Prize-winning Disgraced. Over the past 4 years as head of the Singapore International Festival of the Arts, he has presented game-changing local and international artists, including luminaries such as Sakamoto, Ostermeyer, and Suzuki. He, as head, has commissioned and championed the work of leading artists and companies all throughout the island of Singapore, several of whom have collaborated with others for the first time. So SIFA, in fact, under his leadership, has become a high-quality platform with curated experiences and content to meet different passion points. So I'm sure all of us are very excited to meet him. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to introduce to you the festival director, Mr. Gaurav Kripalani.
Hi, Darwin.
Hi,
What a wonderful
Gaurav.
introduction. What a lovely introduction. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So maybe I will jump straight into it before we go to some of my pre-identified questions. Can you maybe talk a bit about what is SIFA? I mean, for the ones who probably are discovering it for the first time because of this session, can you tell us what is it about?
Sure. The Singapore International Festival of Arts is over 40 years old. It's our national arts festival. It takes place in May every year, and it is a platform to bring in the very best artists from around the world to Singapore, as well as to showcase the very best Singaporean artists to the world.
Okay.
And it is multidisciplinary. In the past, as you know, when you go to festivals around the world, you'd flip through the fest guide and you'd go to the music section, theater section, dance section. I think what's happened around the world in the last few years is those categories, we've certainly taken out those categories because so many artists work in different medium that we don't categorize it like that anymore. But for all intents and purposes, it is a multidisciplinary platform that takes place across the entire island.
Okay. So I guess my next question would be, what was, I mean, and Bunhui already mentioned it, that there was, I guess, a major impact that the pandemic had on SIFA. So what was the significant moments for you guys and what was going through your head as the pandemic was rolling over the world and then sort of throwing monkey wrenches into so many things, beginning from 2020 and then 2021. Can you maybe tell us the story of what happened to SIFA from 2020 and then 2021?
Sure. So the festival director appointment in Singapore is a 3-year appointment. So I was honored to be asked, and I did it. It was 2018, 19, and 20. And 2020 was going to be the culmination of my 3-year arc and what I'd envisioned for how to grow the festival and et cetera, et cetera. And then we launched in, I think, January and announced the program, and everybody was raving about it and said, okay, it's the best program yet. And then a few weeks later, we canceled the whole thing, which was absolutely heartbreaking for me personally. I mean, I understand completely, logically, intellectually, it's the correct thing to do. You know, safety is paramount. The country is going into lockdown. But personally, it was just, and for our team, it's just, you know, years of work. And I commissioned various projects in 2018 when I started to be delivered in 2020 because I wanted these artists to have a 3-year gestation period to develop the work, and that went out the window. So it was just, I think May was just a surreal time. But, you know, I think everybody around the world went through this, right? It's just all of us. It's kind of, I was like, I've never spent so much time in my house. So it was, but here's what's interesting. One of the things that we did so the festival is largely funded by the National Arts Council. What the council did with us, which was great, is they basically said, all right, rather than we've committed this money to produce this festival, let's see what we can do to use the money to do 2 things. Keep the arts community employed, because as you know, everywhere around the world, artists were just suffering. How do we create employment and opportunities for artists? And secondly, how do we keep the arts top of mind for audiences? So we created something called version 2.020, and it became a 6-month digital festival. And it was a Herculean task in that normally for the festival, we're producing and planning 2 years out. This was a 6-month festival created in real time. So we were deciding what was going to go online next week or next month. And then finding Singaporean artists who could adapt, could innovate, and could present work that was exciting to perform online, that wasn't just streaming. And that happened from June to December. And then in November, venues we were allowed to open venues with safe management measures and very restricted seating capacity. I think it was 25% capacity. But then within a week, we were able to pivot that digital work into live work again. So my poor team, just everybody else was at home watching Netflix, and my team were working their socks off to deliver this live digital festival. So it became a very, very busy 2020. But I would say, if you asked me in my 4 years, that's one of the things I'm proudest of, that we were able to, at the height of this horrible thing, create content, create art, bring joy to people, and bring communities together, even if it was online.
Yes.
So that was our 2020.
Amazing.
And then
Amazing.
So it's supposed to be my last year. And then they very nicely said, okay, will you stay on for another year? And just take all your shows from 2020 and put them into 2021 so you can finish your arc. And I thought, wow, that's really nice of them to give me that, because my successor, Natalie Hinadege, is already on board and she was going to take over. And I had a conversation with her. She was super understanding and said, no problem, Gaurav, do it. I'll do the year after. And sitting in isolation, I had to do a trip to the UK, and I came back and I did 2 weeks quarantine in a hotel by myself. I think it's the first time I spent 2 weeks by myself in one room. But it was really a time of reflection, and it was a time of reassessing, and it was also a time to recharge, because, you know, we were all exhausted.
Yeah.
And I think the epiphany I had was, you cannot just port the shows over. If we are going to do a festival in 2021, it has to be a festival that responds to the here and now. It has to be a festival that addresses the world we're living in. It has to be a festival that talks about the issues people are going through. And very importantly, it's about a festival that can bring people together that have been apart for a year. So we actually threw everything out and started programming from scratch and created a very exciting festival. And the festival commissions that got postponed, they were all able to adapt and create work for 2021. And what was interesting, the last point I'll finish with, was it was very interesting talking to artists, because there were some amazing artists who are world-renowned, but couldn't find a way to adapt their work to a new form of presentation. And there were younger artists and other artists who really did pivot and have created exceptional work that's available both live and digitally, or incorporate technology into their work. And I think that's what the SIFA 2021 lineup was full of.
Okay, so actually you bring up a very interesting point, and I guess that's what I want to sort of maybe ask something more about. You talked about how the festival evolved because of the constraints imposed by the pandemic and the shift to digital. You also mentioned about how important it was for finding content that sort of could bring, that could unify the exercise. So it also, from I guess my perspective, so I'm more a businessman, an arts producer rather than an artist myself. So it wasn't just a case of you taking a camera in front of a performance and then shifting and then uploading it online. So apart from making sure that you had those kinds of tools available for the larger audience that would be listening to us and would probably want to maybe, for young artists all throughout Asia that did not or do not necessarily have that kind of experience, but would want to maybe benefit from what you guys have learned. What should they be thinking about, apart from just making sure that, you know what, you can resort to a filmic medium, as Bunwi said, but beyond that, what do you need to think about in order to be successful in bringing in guiding artists from their original medium into this new world?
I think there's such a great question. There's so much happening now in terms of innovation. I'll give you some examples of things we're doing. So we're working with an artist called Scott Sylvan, who's got a show called The Journey. He's based in Scotland. I saw his work in 2018 in Edinburgh. And it's 20 people sitting at a table having a 3-course meal. And he's a mentalist and an illusionist and a theater performer. He basically weaves this incredible narrative and reads your mind through this beautiful dinner with plenty of whiskey to go along, because it is Scotland. And I loved it and I wanted to bring it, and for various reasons it didn't happen. But he's then pivoted and created this show called The Journey, which is the same experience, but online. So he's created a platform where 30 people can appear on screen with him in his living room and have a conversation with him. And he's reading your mind and weaving the story digitally. And the beauty of the show, so we're doing it 7 to 8 p.m. every day. Anyone in the world can come and participate in this. You don't have to be in Singapore.
Yeah.
So that to me epitomizes exactly what I've been trying to do with Singaporean artists. Well, there's groups who are launching new music albums, and rather than just release the album, they're working with artists to create an entire VR experience. So you will go to different locations and you will listen, put on the VR goggles and headphones and listen to a track from this album with this really trippy visual representation of it. So there are all sorts of things happening at the moment that I think, there are 2 things that I will say. One is the critical thing was not to use technology for technology's sake. It has to support the art. And the second thing that I would say is the biggest thing I would say to anyone who's wondering how to use all these things now to reach greater audiences. And I think what's very exciting is also the reach. One thing I wanted to make sure of for the 21 festival, we weren't going to stream anything, meaning you could not sit back on your sofa with popcorn and watch a recording of an orchestra or a ballet I wasn't interested in that. Our video on demand is a separate thing, which I will come to in a minute, because I think that's very important, as when we highlighted. But I think the critical thing of all our online content, you are actually engaging with the artist. We have a show called As Far as Isolation Goes, which was created by Lebanese artist Tanya El-Khoury, performed by a Palestinian called Basil. That's a one-on-one show. Basil, you're one-on-one with him. And he guides you through the show and plays this music, and you participate with him. And it's the next best thing to being in the room with him. Of course, we would love him in the room with us and love him here, but that is the next best thing. And then the last example I will give you is, well, 2 examples. 2 of my Singapore commissions, 9 Years Theatre, who are trained in Suzuki method and work very closely with Suzuki, and Anne Bogard's City Company in New York, who are also masters in Suzuki method. We wanted them to do a collaboration. So they're doing Chekhov's 3 Sisters in Mandarin and English. And they were going to perform here. And then we couldn't bring the Americans in. They completely, in 5 months, threw everything out the window that they had been working 3 years on, and re-envision the entire work where the Singaporean actors are performing on stage and the American actors are appearing on screen. And it takes about 5-10 minutes to get used to that. But after that, suddenly you just feel like they're there and they're performing. And I think it's one of the best productions of 3 Sisters I've seen. We had the same issue with Year of No Return, which is a necessary stage collaboration with artists from Southeast Asia, including the Philippines, about climate change. That work had to be continuously updated because the issue on climate change and the topics discussed change monthly. So that was a constantly evolving play. But the artists from around the region appear on screen with the artists from Singapore on stage. So we've learned to adapt.
I cannot help but be really, really impressed at the degree to which you guys have changed and adapted to the pandemic. I say so not in an effort to flatter you guys. Our company was right there as the pandemic rolled through the Philippines, and we saw how our own theater community or arts community in the Philippines had to sort of go back to the drawing board and re-envision and reimagine how they would continue to share their art with the country despite all of the constraints. And hearing, I think, the lessons and the stories that you've shared, I think would really, really be helpful. Particularly what resonated with me was, do not use technology for its own sake. It must serve the art, the work. And I think that's what some people often fall into. They're so intimidated by it. I don't understand Zoom, or I don't understand YouTube. I don't understand how to do these digital things. I've always been a live performer or a live performance artist, or my medium is different. So I think that's really something very, very helpful, I think, for the audience that would be joining us this afternoon.
I would just give one add-on to that. So, and here's the mindset shift that happened for me personally as well. When this pandemic broke out at the start of last year, I was right there with every artist going, we are live performers. We're a live medium. What is this digital stuff? We don't do that in our work. That's not the essence of... all I will say to people is, we got to get over it. We are a live medium. There is nothing that compares to it. I'm not saying that. Of course, I want everything to be live and theaters to be full again with audiences. We all crave that. But until that happens, boy, do you need to get on this digital bandwagon, or you're going to get left behind, because it is not going away.
So Gaurav, is that the reason why the theme for SIFA this year is connection, compassion, and community? Is that really what sits behind that message?
So I'm actually very adamant about not having themes for the festival, because I think major arts festivals have such a broad range of work that I just think you can't encapsulate a festival into a sentence. There are, however, multiple thematic strands. So one of the key things that we've used for this is a festival for the here and now, a festival that responds to the world we're living in. But one of the thematic strands is, as you said, compassion, care, and community. And I think that stems from one of the things that the arts has to do, and the arts can do better than almost anything else, is care for oneself, care for each other, and care for our planet. And knowing that was very key in how we programmed some of our things. So it's as simple as, we have healing workshops, sound meditation, because they're called the healing arts for a reason. I have a simple program where we're working with a Michelin star chef who's making misiam. You're going to get this DIY noodle kit from a Michelin star chef at a incredibly affordable price. And you can order this, and this will come to your house. And on the last day of the festival, which is Sunday the 30th, everyone is going to have a big community lunch. We can't meet, we can't go out at the moment, but the chef will actually talk and show you how to put this together. And I think there's an element of healing and community through food, and it doesn't have to be always performance. I mean, it's culinary art. So there are broad ranges of how we can tackle this. And another big issue is obviously sustainability in the planet. We as an industry, the arts, are terrible for the planet if you think about it. A festival, you're flying people around the world. We build sets and costumes. They're not necessarily made of recyclable material. They're more often than not, at least in Singapore, disposed of straight after. So we're having a lot of talks and conversations about how do we address this? How can we make this more sustainable? How can the arts play its part to help our planet? So I think that's how I try to address what you just asked.
Yes. So I have another question. So there are two questions actually. I'll ask the second question because it connects to what you had just said first. What is next, given what's happening to the world and given the themes that you've discussed? How do you think SIFA will evolve, and what's in it for audiences? What's in it for artists? What can we look forward to in the coming iterations of SIFA? Not just in the programming that you've talked about now, but in how you guys see SIFA evolving in the next several years.
So one of the things that the National Arts Council is clear on is they want to rotate the festival directors every 3 years. So what's great about that is everybody has their own taste and vision, and I think my successor will absolutely take the festival to greater heights and do wonderful things with it, I have no doubt. But on a broader response to your question, I think digitization is here to stay. And having an element of technology's involvement in production, I don't think that's going anywhere. Of course, we'll have live performances, and that will be key. But one of the things that we have learned, and I think everyone around the world has, in the performing arts, learned this. When the pandemic hit and you saw things like the National Theatre in the UK streaming their beautiful productions with their phenomenal filming and multi-camera shoots and sound edits, and the rest of us in the world were like, oh, we had a single video camera at the back to do an archive recording. It's like, we can't put that online. So that was a good learning lesson for all of us. And so what we've done with SIFA this year, which I think will stay for going forward, is we have 10 original commissions happening this month. We are investing in filming them all properly with multi-camera shoots. And as Bunhui said, I'm not interested in live streaming them. I'm interested in filming them, editing them, and then putting them out as high quality productions. Because honestly, I don't think audiences care whether they're watching it live or they watch it a week later. They just want to see a good show without lag and without interruptions and good sound. So that was a decision made. So what we've done this year is, and this is actually something that could be interesting to your audience, is June 5th to the 20th, all that content that has been produced and is happening live, or some of the shows that had to get canceled because now, unfortunately, on the day we opened our festival, more restrictions were put in place. So a lot of our shows had to become filmed rather than performed live. June 5th to the 20th, our video on demand series is available, and you can watch all this content. And from a Singaporean point of view, why that's exciting is Singaporean artists and their shows will get to be seen around the world. And that wouldn't have happened unless you flew to Singapore to watch the shows before. So I think that is something that I'm pretty sure will be here to stay going forward.
So for my last set of questions, it really has to do with Heart for Art. and I'm sure that some members of our audience know about it. But can you tell us what inspired it and what is it about?
I think when we were at the height of lockdown, which we called circuit breaker, last year, it was a really, really challenging time for everybody. But the arts community really suffered. I mean, there was no work anyway, right? I mean, I think everyone around the world in the arts faced this. And so we just created Heart to Art, and we just told the public, it's like, just send a message of solidarity and support for the arts community. What would you like to say to them? And it was such a simple initiative, but we got countless messages, and we just used our platform to showcase this outpouring of, we can do this, you got this, we can do it together, we're there for you. And it was very simple, and it had a wonderful response, and I think the arts community really, really appreciated it. And we've left it online, and as a National Arts Festival, we've got a platform that we can do this, and people can go and see these. And I think it meant a lot to the artists. So I think that was a very simple gesture. One last thing I will say, as thunder rumbles around me, there is a silver lining to COVID. When everything was shut and we could not do live entertainment, audiences began to miss it. And I think audiences would take it for granted that they could go see a show whenever they wanted. And suddenly it wasn't there. And that is actually a silver lining, because when we reopened, everything sold out in minutes. Whichever company was producing work, and for the festival, when we launched live shows, I mean, literally, tickets which would have taken weeks to sell went in minutes, because the audience were craving art. And I really see that if we have to look at a silver lining to this horrible time, it is that people do not take the arts for granted anymore.
Such a hopeful message, and I think many of us, particularly, for example, in the Philippines, where unfortunately we have not been able to open yet, and we're waiting for the day that we can. This is really inspiring to hear. So I think now we'll have time for some questions, Gaurav, from the people listening. So we have a question. The first question from Pamela. When do you see the arts or the theater community going back to full operations or normalcy? So Pamela Bared.
Oh, if only I had a crystal ball. So I'm going to give you a slightly depressing answer, unfortunately. I think this is going to go on for the next few years. I think it's going to be 5 years before venues are full again and people are not masked, and obviously it's going to be different for every country. Once you have a completely vaccinated population, then that's going to make things much easier to achieve that. Well, we can see in some Western countries that they are reopening now, right? Which is good in terms of it bodes well that we will all get there. Asia is having a harder time now. But until the virus comes under control globally, and for Singapore, we're a tiny island that's completely dependent on open borders. We can't just shut the country down. That means there will always be this virus coming in. So until everyone's vaccinated, I think it's going to be safe management measures and distance seating. I mean, if you think about it, this is where I'm a little torn, right? We do a show in a 2,000 seat theater and we're allowed 100 people. it's kind of sad when you sit in that theater and you only see 100 people and a ton of empty red seats. But on the other hand, I would kill to be one of those 100 people and be listening to live music. It's like, I don't care if the seats around me are empty. So step by step, sorry it's not more optimistic, but I think this is going to go on for a long time. We just need to adapt and learn how to create art and do what we do best.
Yes, agree. I agree completely. We have another question. Do you see, from Dennis, do you see going both digital and physical as the platform for the future?
Absolutely.
Meaning a hybrid delivery or hybrid platforms. Is this something that will be here to stay?
Absolutely. I would bet a lot of money on it. I think now we've all learned, and we've all suffered. I think now everything. So when we programmed 2021, when we were programming it, we were like, okay, what if COVID's still around and things were looking really good? But we had a plan B for everything. As when we said, a plan A, B, C, and D. It was very much about, if we go into full lockdown, how can we still deliver a festival digitally? If it's a partial lockdown, what can we do live? What can we do digitally? So we were prepared. I mean, it was not fun that it happened on our opening night. And we had to go from, we were allowed 250 people and it was reduced to 100. So a lot of people had to be contacted in 24 hours and say, we're really sorry, but we're refunding you your ticket. But I think everybody understands, right? I mean, safety is paramount, safety is first. That's what's best for keeping everyone safe and the country safe. So we did it, but we were prepared for it. So I think hybrid, digital, whatever you call it, is absolutely here to stay, because I think we would be foolhardy not to have both things in place as scenarios for the future. Did I lose you? Hello? Okay, I think we lost Darwin. Okay. Caitlin, do you want to jump in and ask questions in the meantime? Or if people can hear me, I can keep chatting. There we go. Hi. Darwin, do we have you back? Hooray, we have you back.
Okay, Darwin, are you there?
Hello,
Okay,
sorry,
okay.
Go
on ahead.
I was the one that suffered from a connection issue. I don't know what happened, but I heard the last part of your answer, and I do agree. So maybe just to jump in and share a little bit of the Philippine experience. I do think that the hybrid, physical, digital, the combined ways of accessing audiences will be here to stay. And as you pointed out earlier, there is an upside to it. You can open up to audiences that you would never have imagined watching and appreciating your show or your work in ways that it wasn't possible pre-pandemic. I mean, for example, Singapore is a hub, of course, and a lot more people do go to Singapore, not just for business, but for arts and culture. But the Philippines, maybe not so much. But to be able to do that now because of the way that the internet and digital has opened that up, I think is something that's also quite exciting for the future. We have another question.
I have to tell you, I have this complete love affair with the Philippines. So I've spent a lot of time there, and I go every year to watch shows. So
Okay.
I'm definitely somebody who does go to the Philippines for arts and culture.
Yes. So yeah, so I think it's both, yeah, and you're right. I mean, they're very, I mean, the one thing that we can maybe look forward to is when the pandemic is over, or as we transition out of the really panic mode in the very early days to the mode wherein we sort of learn to adapt, is that we may be performing to much larger audiences that now miss us, as you say, audiences that now are craving desperately for what they took for granted in the past, but also now new audiences that would not have been possible for us to access without all of these tools that we now are competently able to sort of utilize, as SIFA has done marvelously, I think, for this year's festival. We have another question. Go ahead.
The other thing I will say is, I mean, this is also a socioeconomic conundrum, right? Because you need access to technology and you need internet to achieve all these things, which not everybody has as well. So I think that's one of the things we're battling. But in countries which have high data penetration, it's like, at least when I am in the Philippines, I certainly see absolutely everybody walking and texting at the same time. But what my point on that is, if we know that, and if we know that people are on their phones all the time, then we should figure out, how do we create art that's accessible and use that technology that is accessible to people from different economic backgrounds. So we have a show that is called En Route, which is an Australian production, but it's a solo journey that's been created. It's a walking tour, and it's designed to see a different part of Singapore and see Singapore in a new light. And it's a 2-hour walking tour, but you are basically do it on your own, and you are sent text messages as instructions on where to go next and what to do. And, you know, it's a wonderful example of how everybody here has a phone. So how can we use that technology to create art? So it's another example of, you have to cater to. But yes, the broader point is, the other silver lining of COVID is we're going to reach a much, much bigger global audience.
Yeah. So we have another question sent in by Johan. Since we can't travel to Singapore to catch the shows during SIFA, what can audiences abroad enjoy and look forward to? So you've already mentioned some, so maybe you can tell them about what you're excited about and what they should be looking forward to seeing on SIFA.
So so this is now pure plug time, but if you go to SIFA.sg, there are two things I would say. We have a slew of, as I said, online content that is engaging with the artists. So wherever in the world you are, you can access The Journey, which is the Scott Sullivan show. You can access As Far as Isolation Goes. You can access all these works where you get to interact with these artists. So you don't have to be here to do that. But I would really, really encourage everyone to get a ticket. So you can buy a ticket to watch individual productions in our video on demand week, or you can buy a bundle and package that allows you to see 10, 20 shows over the course of 3-4 weeks, which I think is worth doing, because you just get to, and for music lovers, there's now our entire Compassion Chamber music series is going to be available. We're doing a collaboration between the Singapore Symphony Orchestra and the Singapore Dance Theatre, and this was going to be one of our highlights of the festival, but we had to postpone the show because of the number of, obviously when you have an orchestra and you have a dance company, there's going to be a lot of people. So with the new restrictions, that physically wasn't possible, but we are going to film it. and I think it won't be available for the whole VOD period, but July 12th, 13th. And I think that'll be beautiful because there are 3 parts. And one of the pieces is choreographed by Pam Tanowitz, who I think is one of the most amazing choreographers on the planet. And she choreographed this work for Singapore Dance Theatre by Zoom, which is also would have been unthinkable, right? And then the last piece is an original choreography and composition work by 2 Singaporean artists. So I'd encourage people to go and see that. So there's a lot. So I would buy a video on demand pass and just enjoy some good art and listen to some good music. And if you're around this week, then go and do the journey. And as far as isolation goes and all the other shows where you actually get to meet the artists and participate.
Yes, agree. So we have another interesting question. So this one closer to my heart from Amy. There's been a lot of competition in the digital space for people's attention and also for resources, for funds. Is it okay to ask you what the revenue model or what the commercial model is behind SIFA, or what has worked at least in terms of resourcing and funding festivals or artworks that you guys support?
You know, that is an amazing question because, okay, so here's where we're very, very fortunate here. The festival is commissioned by and funded by the National Arts Council. So the funding comes from the government. So we're very blessed that we have that. But for arts groups on their own, this is proving to be the $1 million question, because to do a proper recording, multi-camera recording, and invariably you need to film over 2-3 days because it's live art, right? It's not going to be perfect once. So you splice. So you're looking at thousands of dollars to film this properly. And then how do you get people to buy a ticket for that? Because, as you know, we are zoomed out. We, you know, we're on calls and meetings and talks all day long. Do you really want to spend your evening doing that? So how do we entice audiences to support our work? How do we, for all the companies and individuals producing content, how do we get people to come and pay for it? So this was one of the things when National Theatre during the lockdown released all this stuff for free. As an audience member, like, what a gift, right? You're seeing amazing work. As a producer, I was like,
yes,
stop doing it for free. Like, how do we charge for our content if they can go and watch that one for free?
Exactly.
So, but I think it will change. I think we are all going to innovate and figure out. One of the things that have worked for some groups, they've done it as fundraising exercises. So if there's actually, you know, I think people understand that the arts are really, really suffering. And if you have good content, and if you do it as donate what you can, at least I can only speak for Singapore, but I think that actually raised more money than the ones that they sold tickets for. So that's one short-term solution to contemplate. I don't know what it's like in the Philippines, but yes, I would recommend that. But yes, I think we are going to work towards the model. We all have to figure out that model so that digital content is paid for and that becomes a revenue stream.
Yes, actually, just maybe a short plug from my company, and that's what we've been able to actually help with. Many of the creators, the artists, the performers throughout the pandemic were actually using Ticket to Me as a platform to showcase their art. So one of the groups that we service and that has been a partner for a very long time are the improv comedy performing groups. And they've continued to do that over Zoom. So the Filipino comedians and improv actors and theater producers, they never stopped. And they've continued to command really, really strong audiences weekly, monthly. We also have, as you mentioned, I cannot help but relate when you said that about the National Theatre, because when we were speaking to our own theater company partners, we realized the same thing. We had really crappy video documentation of fantastic performances, but they could not monetize it in that way. And so I guess that's really good lessons for the future for all of us. But for those of us that, and particularly those who are in the Philippines that need help, then that's where a platform like Ticket to Me can help you. We can help you not just raise funds, but really help you reach your audiences in a sustainable way so that you can keep making your art, you can keep performing for your audience in a way that that allows you to do that even when the theaters physically are closed. So I will now turn on to Gaurav again for your closing remarks, Gaurav. I think it's been a fantastic conversation. So over to you.
I think I have said absolutely everything I could possibly say. I just want to say thank you for this opportunity and for showcasing the festival. And I think it's great to have a conversation about what's happening in the arts in our region. I have, as I said, so many Filipino friends who are artists and performers, and just chatting to them, I know how hard it is. And one of the things that we have to be careful about is, in Singapore, there are practitioners, I mean, if you think about it, the arts is a gig economy, right? 90% of the people who work in it are freelance artists, from the director, the actors, production team, all the way down. And I have personal friends who have left the industry to find jobs to be able to pay rent. And will they come back when this finally blows over and we go back to normal? I'm not sure how many will. So for a young, we're babies, right? Singapore is 50-something years old. And the art scene is probably about 30-something years old. So it's a very, very, very young industry. And to lose, it's taken 30 years to build up an art scene. And to see so many people leave it now who may never come back, I think it's going to set us back for years. So we're fortunate that the government has been very supportive of artists here. Anywhere in the world, every single artist will be like, we need more money. You always need more money, but at least there's a recognition and acknowledgement of it is an industry that we should fight to protect and survive. And I agree. The community has absolutely rallied, and I pray for all the artists that you guys have that are struggling too, and for us as well, that we need this to be over, because our passion, our commitment, our life is devoted to producing art, to tell a story, to have a voice, to bring enjoyment, to be a mirror to society. I mean, we play an important role. The arts are essential, and we need to communicate that to everybody. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Gaurav. Now let me bring back our two earlier speakers, Boon Hui and Joy from the Asia Society, maybe to help close off the program for this afternoon.
Yeah.
Over to you guys.
Thank you, Darwin. Thank you, Gaurav. It was such a wonderful conversation. And I'd like to turn over first to Boon Hui. Boon Hui, any last words from you? Any last plugs or invitations for SIFA as well?
Don't let the pandemic spoil your art. If you can't see it live, log on to the SIFA website, sifa.sg, and look at the digital programming and the VOD season. And I think as an arts community, a global arts community, I think we must believe that we can make it past this hump. Otherwise, there's no point. We should all go and hibernate in the mountains right now. But the art may change, our practice may change, our institutions may change. But I'd like to say that as long as we have a civilization, we will have art, and I think everybody needs to keep that in mind.
Right. Thank you. Well said, Boon Hui. And again, my appreciation to Darwin for hosting our
Thanks, Darwin.
talk this afternoon. And Gaurav, thank you for your time. And Asian Society Philippines is here to help SIFA push your programs in the coming weeks. If you need us, just you know how to catch us.
Joy, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
We are catching you right now
Sure.
whilst we have you. Please help promote SIFA.
Yes,
Tell
we
everybody
will.
about the
And as we mentioned earlier, this program is part of our Eyes on Singapore, Eyes on Asia series of Asia Society Philippines. And hopefully do join us next week, May 28th, for the next one. We'll be having the Singapore Tourism Board Executive Director for the Philippines, Ruby Liu, talk to us about Update Singapore. So we'll be exploring more of the endeavors of Singapore, like the Clean and Connect at Changi and all that. And for the Asia Society members and Manila House members, we have an exclusive Kuwait kit just for you. So please do sign up. You want one, Darwin?
I miss Singapore food.
Yes. So we'll see you then. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.